Darkness. That's all I saw when I opened my eyes. My head throbbed, and the air smelled of mildew and something metallic. My mouth was dry, my tongue sticking to the roof of it as I struggled to focus. I tried to move, but my wrists wouldn't budge. The cold, biting metal against my skin told me why. Handcuffs. My heart pounded as panic set in. Where the hell was I? I shifted, feeling the roughness of the floor beneath me. Something soft brushed against my skin. A blanket? No, a towel. My chest tightened as I realized I wasn't wearing anything. Not a single piece of clothing. Naked and handcuffed, I muttered under my breath, my voice hoarse. "What the hell, Ethan?" A faint noise caught my attention. A muffled laugh followed by hushed voices. I turned my head toward the sound, squinting through the dim light. A doorway. Beyond it, shadows moved, intertwined. My stomach dropped as the voices became clearer. "I told you he wouldn't wake up yet," a woman's voice said. "Hannah." My wife's voice sent a jolt through me, but it wasn't relief I felt. It was confusion, anger. She wasn't alone. A man's deeper voice followed, his tone smug. "You're lucky I know how to handle this kind of thing." I strained against the handcuffs, the metal biting into my wrists as I tried to make sense of what I was hearing. The shadows moved closer, and then I saw them. Hannah, her blonde hair cascading over her shoulders, laughing softly as she leaned into him. And him, Liam, her yoga instructor. My breath hitched as I watched them, her hand resting on his chest, his arm draped casually around her waist. They looked intimate, the kind of intimacy that doesn't belong to strangers. The kind that doesn't belong to anyone except a husband and wife. "What the hell is this?" I shouted, my voice raw and echoing in the small space. They froze, their heads snapping toward me. Hannah's face went pale, her eyes wide with shock. "Ethan," she stammered. "No, it's Santa Claus," I snapped. "What the hell is going on?" Liam stepped forward, his expression shifting to something almost amused. "You're awake earlier than I expected," he said. I glared at him, rage boiling in my chest. "Get these off me," I growled, tugging at the cuffs. Hannah hesitated, glancing at Liam. "I can explain," she started, her voice trembling. I laughed bitterly. "Oh, I'd love to hear this one, Hannah. Really, I would." Liam shrugged, pulling a key from his pocket. "Your call," he said, handing it to her. She fumbled with the key, her hands shaking as she unlocked the cuffs. The moment my wrists were free, I stood, grabbing the towel to wrap around myself. My body was trembling, but not from cold, from fury. "What's going on?" I demanded again, my voice low and dangerous. Hannah opened her mouth, but no words came out. Liam stepped closer, his smug smile returning. "Maybe we should all calm down," he suggested. "Shut up," I snapped, my glare fixed on him. "You don't get to tell me anything." Hannah reached for me, but I stepped back, the weight of her betrayal crashing over me. "Don't," I said sharply. "Don't touch me." Her hand dropped to her side, her eyes filling with tears. "Ethan, I swear it's not what it looks like." I barked out a laugh, the sound bitter and hollow. "Not what it looks like." "Are you kidding me, Hannah? You're standing there with him, while I'm naked and handcuffed like some kind of idiot, and you're telling me it's not what it looks like?" Liam raised his hands in mock surrender. "Look, maybe we should give him some space," he said, turning to Hannah. "Yeah, great idea," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Run away. That's your specialty, isn't it?" Hannah's tears spilled over, but I didn't care. I couldn't. Not now. They left without another word, the sound of the door slamming echoing through the space. I sank to the floor, my head in my hands as the anger gave way to something heavier. Betrayal. For hours, I sat there, trying to make sense of it all. The man I trusted to guide my wife through her passion for yoga. The woman I'd promised to love and protect. They had both betrayed me. But I wasn't going to let this break me. I would find out the truth. And then, I'd make them pay. The door slammed behind them, leaving me in silence. My chest heaved as I tried to control my breathing, the anger still simmering beneath the surface. The towel wrapped around my waist felt like a pathetic shield against the storm inside me. I glanced around the room. A small, dimly lit space with bare walls and a faintly sour smell. It didn't tell me much about where I was or how I'd gotten here. My memories were hazy, fragments of the previous night flashing through my mind. There was wine, Hannah pouring us both glasses, her laugh soft and melodic. Then nothing. A blank space where the rest of the evening should have been. How had it come to this? I forced myself to move, my legs shaky as I searched for my clothes. They were folded neatly on a chair in the corner, almost as if someone had planned for me to find them. I dressed quickly, the feel of the fabric grounding me slightly. But my mind wouldn't stop racing. Back at home, the silence was deafening. Every corner of the house felt like it was conspiring against me, whispering secrets I couldn't quite hear. Hannah wasn't back yet. Neither was Liam. Good. I needed time to think, to piece together what the hell was going on. The first place I looked was her phone. Hannah had always been protective of it, keeping it close, the screen locked with a code I didn't know. But she wasn't here now, and I had time. I found it on the kitchen counter, the faint buzz of a notification catching my attention. The screen lit up briefly, showing a message preview. Don't forget to delete the history. Ed. My chest tightened. I tried to open the phone, but the lock screen mocked me. 4 digits. For possibilities that could unlock the truth. I started with the obvious. Our wedding anniversary. Wrong. Her birthday. Wrong. Mean it. Wrong. Frustration boiled over as I racked my brain. Then it hit me. I entered 0415, the day we adopted our dog, Charlie. The screen unlocked. My heart raced as I scrolled through her messages, scanning for anything incriminating. There were dozens of texts from Liam, their tone casual but layered with a familiarity that made my stomach churn. Can't wait to see you tonight. Last night was amazing. You're incredible. Don't tell him yet. He won't understand. The words blurred as anger surged through me. I wanted to throw the phone, to shatter it against the wall. But I needed it. I needed proof. I took screenshots of everything, emailing them to myself before carefully locking the phone and returning it to its place on the counter. My hands trembled as I leaned against the sink, my mind racing. This wasn't just an affair. This was calculated. Planned. But why? Why now? I moved to the bedroom, opening drawers and rifling through her things. It felt wrong, invasive, but I couldn't stop. In the bottom drawer of her nightstand, I found something that made my blood run cold. A key. Small and unmarked. It didn't look like it belonged to anything in our house. I pocketed it, my heart pounding. When Hannah finally came home, her eyes were red and swollen, her face pale. She didn't speak, didn't try to explain. She just went upstairs, leaving me alone in the quiet. The next morning, I left early. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to find them here. The key burned a hole in my pocket as I drove aimlessly, trying to think of where it might lead. It didn't fit anything I recognized, but there was one place I hadn't checked: Liam's yoga studio. I had never been inside, but Hannah had talked about it endlessly, describing it as her sanctuary. The thought made my stomach churn. The studio was smaller than I expected, tucked into the corner of a strip mall. The frosted glass windows gave it an air of privacy, the faint scent of lavender wafting out as I stepped inside. A receptionist greeted me, her smile polite but guarded. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'm here to see Liam," I said, my voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath it. She hesitated. "He's not in right now. Can I take a message?" I shook my head, forcing a smile. "That's okay. I'll wait." The receptionist seemed unsure, but she nodded, gesturing for me to take a seat. I didn't wait long. As soon as her attention was elsewhere, I slipped past the desk and into the back hallway. The rooms were small, each one labeled with a brass plaque. Studio 1, Studio 2, Office. The office door was locked. I pulled the key from my pocket, my heart racing as I inserted it into the lock. It turned easily. The door opened, revealing a small, cluttered space. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I searched anyway. The desk drawers were filled with paperwork, student sign-in sheets, invoices, schedules. But it was the filing cabinet in the corner that caught my attention. Inside were folders, each one labeled with a name. I found Hannah's near the back. Inside was a copy of her membership agreement, her attendance record, and a photograph. It was of her and Liam, their arms wrapped around each other, smiling. On the back, in Liam's handwriting, were the words, "The best partner I could ever ask for." My hands trembled as I stared at the picture, the weight of everything pressing down on me. Partner. Not just a student. Not just a friend. Partner. I shoved the folder back into the cabinet and left, my mind racing. This wasn't just about an affair. This was about betrayal on a level I hadn't even begun to comprehend. When I got home, Hannah was waiting for me, her expression guarded. "Where were you?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Out," I said shortly. She flinched, but I didn't care. I walked past her, heading to the bedroom. I needed time. Time to figure out what to do next. Time to decide how far I was willing to go to uncover the truth, and how far I was willing to go to make them pay. The air in the house was heavy, the kind of silence that wasn't peace but pressure. Hannah and I moved around each other like strangers, every shared space brimming with tension. She watched me carefully, her eyes flicking to my face whenever I entered a room, but she didn't speak. Neither did I. I was waiting for the right moment to confront her with everything I knew. That moment came sooner than I expected. It was Saturday morning, and Hannah was in the kitchen, pouring herself a cup of coffee. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes, her usual vibrancy dulled. "Good morning," she said cautiously, her voice strained. "Morning," I replied, my tone flat. I sat at the table, watching her as she moved around the room. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Do you love him?" I asked, my voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. Hannah froze, the coffee pot still in her hand. Slowly, she set it down and turned to face me. "Love who?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Don't," I snapped, slamming my hand on the table. "Don't play dumb, Hannah. You know exactly who I'm talking about." Her face paled, and she gripped the counter for support. "Ethan, please. Just answer the question," I shouted, standing so quickly my chair scraped against the floor. Tears filled her eyes as she shook her head. "It's not like that," she said softly. "Then what is it like?" I demanded, because from where I'm standing, it looks a hell of a lot like you've been sneaking around with your yoga instructor behind my back. She flinched, her tears spilling over. "Ethan, I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she said, her voice breaking. "But it did," I said coldly. "You made it happen." The silence that followed was suffocating. Finally, Hannah spoke, her voice barely audible. "I was lonely," she said. I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and hollow. "Lonely? You were lonely? So, what, you decided to crawl into bed with Liam to fill the void?" "It wasn't like that," she said quickly, her voice desperate. "Then tell me what it was like, Hannah," I snapped, "because I'm dying to understand how this makes any sense." She sank into a chair, her shoulders slumping. "I don't know," she admitted. I felt invisible, like I didn't matter anymore." Her words hit me harder than I expected, but I refused to let them soften me. "You didn't matter?" I repeated, my voice rising. "I've spent years trying to build a life for us, to give you everything you could ever want, and you're telling me you felt invisible?" Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't let up. "Why Liam?" I demanded. "What the hell does he have that I don't?" "It wasn't about him," she said, her voice trembling. "It was about me, about feeling seen." I shook my head, my anger boiling over. "Seen? Are you kidding me, Hannah? You're my wife. You think I don't see you?" "I don't know," she shouted, her voice cracking. "I don't know, Ethan. I was confused, and I made a mistake. A terrible, awful mistake." Her words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I leaned against the table, my hands trembling. "Do you even love me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. "Of course I love you," she said. "Then why?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why did you do this to me? To us?" Hannah shook her head, her tears falling harder. "I don't know," she said again. "I wish I could take it all back." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, I turned and walked out of the room. I couldn't look at her anymore. That evening, as Hannah slept, I sat in the living room, scrolling through the screenshots I had taken from her phone. Every message from Liam felt like a dagger to the chest, each one a reminder of her betrayal. But something caught my eye, a name I hadn't noticed before. Among the messages from Liam was a single thread from someone named R. The tone of the messages was different, less intimate, more businesslike. "We need to meet. Same time, same place. Don't forget to cover your tracks." My stomach churned as I read them. Who the hell was R? I needed answers. The next day, I told Hannah I was going out for a drive. She didn't ask where I was going, and I didn't offer an explanation. I drove to Liam's yoga studio, parking a block away. The building was quiet, the windows dark. I got out of the car and walked to the door, my heart pounding. The key I had found in Hannah's nightstand slid easily into the lock. I stepped inside, the familiar scent of lavender and polish hitting me like a wave. The office was exactly as I had left it, cluttered and chaotic. But this time, I wasn't looking for Hannah's folder. I was looking for Liam's secrets. I rifled through the filing cabinet, pulling out folder after folder. Most of them were harmless, student records, invoices, schedules. But then I found it, a folder labeled R. Morris. Inside was a series of documents, emails, contracts, and receipts. And at the bottom of the stack was a photograph. Hannah and Liam standing with a man I didn't recognize. On the back, in Liam's handwriting, were the words, "The perfect arrangement." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just an affair. This was something bigger, something darker. I left the studio, my mind racing. Who was R. Morris? And what the hell was Hannah involved in? The drive home from Richard Morris's estate was a blur. My mind churned with unanswered questions, each one twisting the knife of betrayal a little deeper. This wasn't just about Hannah and Liam anymore. It wasn't just about an affair. It was something else, something bigger, and I was no closer to understanding it. When I got home, the house was quiet. Hannah's car was in the driveway, but the lights were off. For a moment, I stood outside, staring at the familiar facade of what was supposed to be my sanctuary. Now it felt like a cage. Inside, Hannah was sitting on the couch, her knees drawn up to her chest. She looked up when I walked in, her face pale and drawn. "Where were you?" she asked softly. "Out," I said shortly, pulling off my jacket. She didn't press further. "Good." I headed to the kitchen, my hands shaking as I poured myself a glass of water. I needed to calm down, to think clearly. But the image of Hannah and Richard Morris sitting together in that coffee shop wouldn't leave my mind. What were they planning? "Ethan." Hannah's voice came from behind me, soft and hesitant. I turned to face her, my expression guarded. "What?" She hesitated, her hands wringing nervously. "I know things have been hard lately," she said, "and I know I've hurt you. But I need you to understand that it wasn't just about us." "What does that mean?" I asked sharply. Her eyes filled with tears, and she looked down at the floor. "It means there are things I can't explain," she said. "Not yet." "Try," I said coldly. She shook her head. "You wouldn't believe me." I slammed the glass down on the counter, the sound echoing through the kitchen. "You don't get to decide what I will or won't believe, Hannah. Not after everything you've done. Start talking. Now." Her tears spilled over, but she didn't speak. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Finally, I shook my head and walked past her, heading to the bedroom. I wasn't going to beg her for the truth. If she wouldn't give it to me, I'd find it myself. The next morning, I drove back to Richard Morris's estate. This time, I didn't stay in the car. I parked on a side road and climbed the fence, the adrenaline coursing through my veins, drowning out the fear of getting caught. The property was massive, with manicured lawns and a large, modern house at its center. I crept toward the house, keeping low as I scanned for cameras. When I reached the back patio, I found a door that was slightly ajar. Inside, the house was quiet, the air cool and sterile. I moved quickly, searching for anything that might explain why Hannah was involved with this man. In an office near the back of the house, I found it, a file on Richard's desk, labeled Crane Partnership. Inside were contracts, emails, and photographs, proof of a business deal between Richard and Liam. One email stood out. "Richard, the arrangement is working perfectly. Hannah's involvement has been invaluable. We couldn't have done this without her." I stared at the words, my stomach turning. What the hell was this? Footsteps sounded in the hallway, and I froze, my heart pounding. Quickly, I stuffed the file back into the drawer and slipped out of the room, my pulse racing as I made my way to the door. When I was back in my car, I finally let out the breath I'd been holding. I didn't know what I had just uncovered, but it was clear now. This wasn't just an affair. Hannah was involved in something much bigger. That evening, I confronted her. I didn't give her a chance to speak. "I went to Richard's house," I said, my voice sharp. Her eyes widened, and she took a step back. "What?" "I found the file," I continued, pulling it from my jacket. "The emails, the contracts, the pictures." "What the hell is this, Hannah?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. "Answer me," I shouted, slamming the file onto the table. Her tears spilled over as she sank into a chair. "It's not what you think," she said softly. "Then explain it to me," I demanded. She hesitated, her hands trembling. "It was supposed to be simple," she said finally. "Richard and Liam needed someone to help them secure funding for the studio expansion. I had connections, so I agreed to help. And I pressed." Her tears fell harder. "And it got out of control. Liam started expecting more from me. I didn't know how to stop it." Her confession hit me like a punch to the gut. "So you slept with him?" I asked, my voice shaking. She nodded, her face crumpling. I turned away, my chest tight with anger and betrayal. "I trusted you," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, Ethan." But her words couldn't undo what had been done. The truth was out now, and it had shattered everything. Her confession didn't feel like a weight lifted. It felt like an avalanche crashing down, burying everything I thought I knew about my marriage. I had come to her demanding the truth, but now that I had it, I didn't know what to do with it. Hannah sat at the table, her shoulders hunched as sobs racked her body. I should have felt something. Pity, sadness, anything, but all I could muster was anger. "Pure un filter danger." "I trusted you," I said again, my voice low but trembling. "I trusted you with everything I had, and this is how you repay me?" Her head snapped up, her tear-streaked face desperate. "Ethan, please, don't," I snapped, cutting her off. "Don't beg. Don't apologize. Just don't." She flinched, her tears falling faster. But I turned away, unable to look at her. I went to the bedroom, slamming the door behind me. My chest heaved as I paced the room, my mind racing. Every moment I'd spent questioning myself, doubting my instincts, replayed in my head like a cruel joke. She hadn't just betrayed me. She'd destroyed me. But I wasn't going to let her win. I wasn't going to let Liam win. If they thought they could humiliate me, manipulate me, and walk away unscathed, they were wrong. Dead wrong. The next morning, I left the house early. Hannah didn't try to stop me. Good. I didn't want to see her face. I drove to the yoga studio, parking across the street. I knew Liam would be there. Saturday mornings were when he held his most popular class. The thought of him standing in front of his students, smug and confident, made my blood boil. But I wasn't here for a confrontation. Not yet. Instead, I walked into the neighboring coffee shop and took a seat by the window, my laptop open in front of me. Over the past week, I gathered enough evidence to blow their entire operation wide open. The emails, the contracts, the photograph. It was all there, ready to be weaponized. All I needed was the right moment. And that moment came sooner than I expected. At 10 a.m., Liam's class ended, and the students began to file out of the studio, their laughter and chatter filling the street. Liam followed shortly after, his yoga mat slung over his shoulder and a cocky grin on his face. I watched as he waved to the students, basking in their adoration. The sight made my stomach turn. When the last student left, I closed my laptop and crossed the street. The studio door was unlocked, and I stepped inside, the familiar scent of lavender hitting me like a slap. Liam looked up, his grin faltering when he saw me. "Ethan," he said, his tone cautious. "What are you doing here?" "I think you know," I said coldly, stepping closer. He held up his hands, his expression shifting to one of mock concern. "Look, I get that you're upset, but this isn't the time or place." "This is exactly the time and place," I interrupted, pulling the photograph from my pocket and shoving it in his face. His eyes flicked to the photo, and for a moment his mask slipped. "What is this?" he asked, feigning ignorance. "You tell me," I said, my voice sharp. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you and my wife have been pretty damn busy." Liam sighed, lowering his hands. "Ethan, I didn't mean for things to get out of hand. It was just business." "Business?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You call sleeping with my wife business?" "It wasn't like that," he said quickly. She was helping with the expansion. Things just happened." I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and hollow. "Things just happened? That's your excuse." "I made a mistake," he said, his tone defensive. "But we're both adults. We can handle this without turning it into a spectacle." His words gave me pause, because a spectacle was exactly what I had planned. I stepped closer, my voice low and dangerous. "You don't get to decide how this plays out," I said. "You don't get to walk away from this like nothing happened." Liam's confidence wavered, but he held his ground. "What are you going to do, Ethan?" I smirked, the weight of my plans settling into place. "You'll see." That evening, I sat in the living room, waiting for Hannah to come home. When she walked through the door, her face was pale, her eyes rimmed with red. "We need to talk," she said softly. "No," I said, standing. "We don't. You need to listen." I pulled out my laptop and opened the file containing all the evidence I'd gathered, the emails, the contracts, the photograph. Her eyes widened as she stared at the screen, her hand flying to her mouth. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This ends now," I said firmly. "You're going to end your partnership with Liam and Richard, or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you've been doing." Tears streamed down her face as she nodded, her shoulders shaking. "Okay," she said. "I'll end it. I'll do whatever you want." "Good," I said coldly. The next day, I sent the evidence to Liam's business partners, ensuring his reputation was in tatters. Richard's involvement wasn't spared either. I made sure his investors knew exactly what kind of man they were dealing with. And as for Hannah, she stayed, but things were never the same.